Hey y'all, today we're comparing pigmented and aniline leather using these awesome rainbow country jackets. They're both made with leather from the Shinki Hikaku factory tannery in Japan. It's to the highest grade possible, and you know what? There's really one big difference between them other than the color, and it's the method of applying that color. So we're going to talk about it today. This jacket is a pigmented black horsehide. And let's talk about what that means and what are the pros and cons. So what that means is really this is a water-based lacquer, and this jacket is painted, basically, is the way to think about it. This lacquer completely coats this jacket and it covers it. It fills in some of those nooks and crannies and creates a very even color over the jacket. It can fill in some of those nooks and crannies, and so it really produces a more even texture or expression and can kind of cover up, in some cases, some of that character or look of the leather itself. On the pros side of things, because it's a lacquer, because it's really coating that leather, it is better helping the leather to resist elements. So it is a harder wearing leather and one that is less impacted by your day-to-day wear. It is also, in this case, it's black and it is over a brown horsehide, so this produces a T-core effect. So as the jacket wears and that lacquer gets chipped off and worn off, we get to see some of that brown peeking through, which I think looks really awesome, and if you're into that, is really desirable. On the con side of things, well, we are covering the leather, and so if there's a lot of interesting grain there, some of it's going to be lost, and we lose some of that interesting texture and grain. We also lose some variation in color or depth of color. Now, this is a black jacket, so maybe we're not really looking for depth of color, but hey, look, that is a loss here. You know, we really are looking at just a single shade of black, and the only variation is going to come when that black gets chipped off. So there we have it, the pros and cons. This jacket is aniline. It's full aniline, which means that instead of using a lacquer to basically paint this leather has been dyed. The actual leather itself has been impregnated with this brown color, which has changed the color of the leather. It is something that is in the leather and essentially a part of the leather rather than resting on top of it. Well, what does that mean from a pros and cons standpoint? On the pros, we are really seeing the leather itself, not something applied on top of it. So more of that detail of the grain and the individual beauty of the leather is present. It means that there is a lot of depth of color with this leather. And yeah, it's a brown, but that brown has lighter areas and darker areas. There's some parts of it that are so brown as to almost look black. There is just an awesome amount of texture and color present within this leather because it's been dyed, and we get to see all of those little imperfections and bits and variations in parts of that leather that absorbed a bit more of the dye and some absorbed a little bit less, and that is repeated all throughout the entirety of the jacket. And so it really lets the leather itself shine and produce that depth and interesting character. On the con side of things, that means that this leather is not as well protected as a pigment dyed leather. It's not covered, and so whenever it gets wet or exposed to other elements, it is the leather itself that's kind of directly being impacted. So this leather would kind of be expected to be less hardy or hard wearing. And it also means that if there are imperfections in that leather that are not desirable, that are scars, and you wanted an even appearance, then it is going to be more irregular looking because anything that's present in the underlying hide will be easily visible and not masked by an overlaying of pigment or lacquer. Now, let's directly compare these two so you can kind of see, and I'm going to move in a little bit closer for that. Now look, I know this is a little ridiculous, but I felt the best way to show off these two leathers. I have both jackets on, and I can stack the arms up, and you can actually see them right next to each other on the body. So let's do that. Let's get in close. We're angling towards the light, and you can really see the smoothness of the black and the almost oily or smooth texture of it. It is a very uniform color, and it has a little more shine to it. On the brown, it is a lot more depth and variation of color in there. And those parts I talked about where there's almost like such dark, it looks black nearly. And the leather itself bends a little easier because there isn't this top coat on top. And it's got a bit of a drier feel, less oily, because I'm touching really directly to the leather here. And it creases a little more easily, and you can really see all the different texture much better in the brown. And that's them right next to each other. You see these two big panels here in the middle. You can see the kind of distinction there. It's a small one, but it's there. These are both excellent horsehides from I can't even say it, from the Shinki Hikaku tannery in Japan. And then now look, let's look down here in the middle. You can really see this distinction between these two hides. You know, I'm wearing these as a fashion jacket. I'm not really wearing them to ride a motorcycle or whatever. But on the day-to-day, those pros and cons can make a difference. And today I'm actually wearing this black jacket. So I didn't present a jacket here that showed what's called Semi-Aniline. Semi-Aniline is really just a mixture of those two. It is both dye and lacquer or pigment mixed. So you kind of land a little in between. You're dyeing that underlying leather and putting a top coat. You're not dyeing it as deeply, or you're not top coating it as much. So really just think it's the best of both worlds, or half of each world, however you want to phrase it to yourself. But that's what you get with Semi-Aniline. So that's your quick primer on aniline and pigment dyed leathers. Do you have a preference? Do you care? Is this the first time you've heard about this distinction? You know, it's one of those things that gets thrown around. It's not just marketing speak. There is an actual difference between these two leathers. And I think it's important that if you're encountering this language in the wild on a website or at a shop, that you understand the distinction when you're looking to buy for yourself.